All right, on the previous one, we have seen what a component is, and on this one, we're going to see how many type of components that we have. So basically, we have like two types of components out there. We're going to call them class and functional component. So the difference is basically the first one is on how we're going to be creating or having the component, and the one is using just a class. So for those of you who are familiar, especially with the ASICs, we have a full class implementation, and that's what we're going to be just using for creating a component that is using a class component. Whereas on the other end, we're going to be just using a function, just a normal function with the parameter, with the return type and whatnot. And that's if we're going to be just using it for a component, then we're going to call that one as a functional component. So far, we have two of them, class and functional component, and that's how the first difference is. And the class component, you might hear it or you might read somewhere, you might be listening to it just referred as a state component, as it can work with the component maintain variables, or what we call them like states. And functional ones were not able to do that. So over here, you have seen that I've said we're not, because that's no more the case right now. Starting from like version 16.8, React has introduced what we call hooks. And because of that, like the functional components can also work just like that of like the class components. So in the past, before 16.8, if you're going to have like the React application, then chances are you might have like the class component by default one way or another, because you're going to probably need to have like a variable to be tracked, which is the state that we're going to be just looking at. Whereas on the starting from 16.8 and above, then you have the option not to even create a single component that's going to be just requiring a class. You can have like all functional components, and then for that matter, as of today, like the default and how we're going to be just proceeding with a component is becoming a functional component because of like the hooks. So we're going to take a look on a class components. So the component on this one, they are basically the same definition as they are. They are going to have like the props. We're going to see those shortly, and think of them like as a parameters. So they're going to be just accepting that one, and they're going to be just returning the React element that's going to be just rendered by the browser. So as a component, remember, like this is going to be just, it would be accepting a parameter, and then it would be returning something back to be rendered. And that something is going to be what we call like the React elements. And the way how we're going to be just creating like the class component, or how we define them, is going to be, we're going to be just importing like the React from the React library. And then we're going to have like the class keyword, as that is like basically the keyword we're going to use in order to create a class. And I'm going to have the name of the class, and it's going to extend from React component. And this is necessary, like it's not optional or something. You need to have like a render function with that would be returning the what we call the JSX, or like the to be returned the what we call like the JSX or the React element to be rendered by the browser. So in this case, it looks like that one is going to be just a paragraph which has like a content, and there is also a closing paragraph over here. One thing that you would notice over here, it is a JavaScript, but you know, like if you're trying to do this one on normal JavaScript, then you would have complained. But this one is a special kind of JavaScript that we're going to call it as JSX, which is embedded only for the purpose of like the React. So think of it as, you know, like the modified version of a JavaScript that can be understood by the render, like on the case of like the React. So the idea that we are having with props and states is, props are short for properties. So whatever you want to pass or share to the component, you're going to pass them through the props. So usually this would be happening when you are having one component to be nested in another component. And the other one is states are going to be just only for the purpose of like the component. And a state might have any of its variables that are going to be used by the component only, then in that case, we're going to be just using what we call like the state. So props are going to be just something we're going to pass them around from another component to the current component. And whereas like that's the state are going to be just maintained by the component itself only. So this dot props is how we're going to access them in the class component, and it's going to contain all the associated properties. And this data state is going to be just the one which holds like the states or the local variables per se for that particular component. And when we're using like the state, we're not going to directly apply like the changing, let's say to change like the values or to update the values. We're not going to do like directly this data state and then whatever the state name, and we're going to do like the value. We're not going to do that. We are always going to be just using this data state, and then we're going to pass like the like the property of like the state, like the state, and that's the value that we're going to be associated with it. I know this one is going to be just a lot, and by now you might be like bored on this one, but on the next video, we're going to see like everything that we have said on this one, step by step. Probably I'm going to show you like the visual representation on the next video. And then after that one, we're going to jump into the code and see what this whole thing would look like when we are actually utilizing inside the code. So I'll see you on the next one.